Uncle Marky. Don't give him anything, she said to me. Who, I asked. That dirty old man out there. He's here all the time begging. I tell everyone not to give him any money. He's just going to spend it on drugs. Hard to tell on his age. If I had to guess, I'd say somewhere between 55 and 60 maybe. Vietnam vet, his sign said. Hungry, please help, God bless. I gave him $20 and told him he better find a new corner store to hang out near. That woman inside is telling people not to help you out. Well, you did it anyways, he said. You were a good person. There are other good people around here. I'm okay, despite what she says. Okay, well, take care of yourself, I told him. You too, darling, you too. I managed to make it to my car before I started sobbing. Every time I saw my Uncle Mark, I always said that to him. Take care of yourself, and that was his exact reply. You too, darling, you too. My uncle had a hard life. When he was 17 years old, he drove his car over a molehill in Los Angeles. There weren't seatbelts in cars back then, and he and his buddy were thrown through the windshield. His friend died instantly, but my uncle survived. However, the car rolled over his head. He spent months in the hospital, but all they could really do was wire his jaw back together and wait for him to heal. His hearing was completely shot, but they said he'd make a full recovery. He didn't. Close head injuries caused so many more problems than doctors knew, and back then it was only 1971. After a while, my dad and his other siblings just started calling Mark eccentric, because he was. He did and said strange things that no one understood. He wouldn't enter my parents' kitchen because the water cooler was zapping him, whatever that means, things like that. But he built himself a successful business, and they figured he'd be fine. He was 23 years old when he had a psychotic break. He put airplane fuel in his motorcycle and drove out of LA. At some point, the cops started chasing him, but they couldn't even begin to catch up to him. We laugh about it now, but his bike engine melted right outside Camarillo Mental Hospital. The cops took him to jail. My parents bailed him out the next morning, and he sat in the floor of their car in the back seat with a blanket over his head, talking about the little people coming to get him. My mom suggested they take him back to the hospital. He was there for 6 weeks before he checked himself out. He was highly intelligent and could charm anybody. He wouldn't shower because he said the soap was poisoning him, or take the meds because they were stealing his soul. But he was competent enough to prove to them that he wasn't a danger to himself, so they had to release him. His diagnosis was acute paranoid schizophrenia due to head injury. From that day forward, my uncle lived on the street. No one knows what happened to his business. One day he had it, the next he didn't. There's no record of it. All we know is that when he applied to disability, they were shocked at the amount of money he'd get every month. It wasn't much towards the end of his life, but when my dad was supporting him, but as a 24-year-old, it was a decent chunk of change. He lived under a freeway on-ramp for the 405. For my entire childhood, he lived under freeway on-ramps. He liked that life. He felt safe in that life. When brought inside for a family function, he stayed in a corner with his back to the wall and shouted at people across the room. But he was my uncle. I never knew any different. He brought me presents at Christmas, and he never forgot my birthday. At my dad and stepmother's wedding, my other uncle and my grandfather held him down to shower him. He asked them to because he didn't want to miss the wedding, and he knew that was the requirement, a shower. At the ceremony, which was on a boat in Marina del Rey, he stood outside and took pictures of the sunset. But he was there. He loved his family. My uncle was a bum until I was 15 years old. He wasn't one with a sign, but that's only because he got a check every month. He didn't drink or do drugs. He never smoked or caused any problems. He was mentally ill. Contrary to popular belief, the majority of people on the street are not druggies. They are the mentally ill. There is nothing in this country for the mentally ill, unless you have money. Most of them are just ignored. We pretend they don't exist. There is no place for them to go. Ronald Reagan did away with those places in the early 80s. Before then, there were places they could go, state-funded places, but not now. Yes, a lot of bums do drugs and they drink, but that doesn't negate the fact that they are mentally ill. Drinking keeps them warm in the winter. It helps them survive. Mark lived in an apartment that he took over after my grandfather died in 2003. Before that, he lived in my grandmother's backyard after 1995 because he kept getting run out of his favorite spots by younger bums. He still didn't shower or take meds. He collected toilet paper rolls, which he kept in his clothes for warmth. He had 7 toothbrushes, 1 for each day. He didn't eat right, and he only washed his clothes when the cat told him to, but he didn't use soap. He had 7 couches in his 1-bedroom apartment because the people needed a place to sit. The people were the people in his head. He lived there until his death in January of this year. He died from heart failure, a product of the diabetes that he wouldn't take care of. But he was my uncle. He wasn't harmful. He never hurt a soul. He was just a guy with a mental illness, a bum who preferred open air to a closed-in space. He was my Uncle Mark. I've always given to bums, and I always will. Money, clothes, food. Even if I have nothing, I will smile and be kind, because each and every one of them is a human being. Each one of them could be somebody's uncle.